Welcome to the Moton Museum. My name is Leah Brown. I'm the Assistant Director of Education for Education here at the museum. Today with us we have Miss Rita Moseley. She's from Prince Edward. She's going to share her story with us today as part of the oral history program. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, Miss Rita. So can you say your name, like your full name, where you're from, and then tell us a little bit about your childhood.
My name is Rita Odom Moseley. I'm from Prince Edward County, Farmville, Virginia. This is where I was born, and I still reside. When I was growing up, I lived with my mother, a single parent. I never had a father figure in my life. My brother and I lived together in a household that because my mother and father were married for 5 years. After 5 years, they separated, and I was 2 years old, so I don't remember him at all. So my mother, she always worked. She worked at Longwood College, which is Longwood University now, as a laundry worker. She would wash the students' clothes and press them and have them prepared when they could pick them up. And then I stayed at home with my grandmother while my mother worked, and she decided to put me in Brownie Scout and Girl Scout for me to have something to do instead of just being at home. So I was there in Brownie Scout and Girl Scout for 2 years without any education until my Girl Scout leader came to my house and asked my mother would she allow me to go away to school.
Okay.
I had never been away from home in my life.
All right, Miss Rita. What year would you have started school? Did you have any form of education? All right, pause. You guys. Prince Edward County closed their schools from 1959 to 1964. Miss Rita's story is part of this. She's one of the students that was locked out of school. So definitely changes her education, upbringing, beginning altogether. Okay. So did you have any kind of formal education prior to leaving Prince Edward?
No, I was out of school for 2 years, and I was with my Girl Scout leader during those 2 years.
Okay. Definitely makes a difference. What's your first memory of being in a school?
Well, my first memory of preparing for school was children had to take shots before they could go to school, measles shots and mumps, and so they wouldn't spread disease. So that was my first memory of school. And my next memory is the 2 teachers I had. In the first and third grade, they were sisters. And one of them I used to call the mean teacher, and the other one I would call the very nice teacher because she was But as I grew older, I realized that she was not mean. She had a different way of teaching. We learned from both teachers in those different methods of teaching very well. They made sure that we weren't passed to a grade until we learned what they taught.
Okay, yeah. So definitely in teaching styles changes a different classroom dynamic. How old were you when you started school?
I was 6 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, because they didn't have kindergarten back then.
Oh yeah, that's right. All right. So, okay. We know you left to go to school because there was no public schools in the county. Can you share your experience leaving home for the first time?
Well, leaving home for the first time broke my heart. It took away my mother, my brother, and my friends from me, some I have never seen again. I have lived all of my life with a pain in my heart because I left my brother behind. I felt guilty about that. I've always felt guilty about that until I was 50 years old and talked to him about it. I will never know because of this school closing what I could have done or who I could have been. And that's something that doesn't worry me, but every once in a while I think about it.
What was your experience, in your new location for school? You knew everything.
Well, it was terrifying at the beginning anyway, to just the thought of going to a new school and going to a new town. I had no idea, as young as I was, how far it was. It just felt like I might have been going like 3,000 miles away from home. I was just terrified and frightened, excuse me, and frightened the whole time. And when I was on my way to school, when we were on our way to Blacksburg, Virginia, the traffic stopped. And everybody got out of their cars to see what had happened. And I'll never forget it. I can actually see it now. It was a beautiful red sports car. It had been crushed. The top of it was crushed. And I was already scared and terrified. And that even made me scared because I could hear grown-ups. And I think I was the only child out there. I could hear grown-ups around me saying, I know that person isn't going to make it. I know this person. They were just saying awful things about it. And all of a sudden, it got so quiet that if you had dropped a brick or pin in the street, you would have heard it. That man walked out of that car.
Whoa.
And after seeing that, I knew I had seen a miracle. And I knew if that man could walk out of that car with a crush like that, then I could go away to school, leave my mother and brother, and live with strangers. So I thought about that all the way to Blacksburg, Virginia, that accident and how I had seen a miracle. So that really held me together, but I was actually terrified. I was sent to live with an older lady. She was near 100 years old. She lived until she was 107. And her daughter worked away from home, so she wasn't there during the weekdays. So I was there with her. And she took care of me and everything and made sure everything was okay. So that, we had an opportunity to go to church every Sunday. And my outing was to walk the campus of Virginia Tech. It was huge back then, so I can't imagine how it is. Walk the campus of Virginia Tech was my outing after church. So I met new friends. And my school that I went to was a one-room school with an accordion in the center of it that separated schools. Yeah.
So you guys, if you don't know what an accordion is, it's a musical instrument, but kind of like opens and closes.
Yeah.
So that was typical of some schools, churches, buildings, architecture. Yeah.
Partition. That was.
Yeah. There you go. What was it like in this new community?
It was entirely different, of course. I was placed in a new world. The biggest difference was to me was the schools. I had left a school that was one story and had many classrooms. And it was a Moton museum.
Yeah.
I was in that school when school closed. Going from that type of environment to a one-room school, and then the next year going to a school that was campus style. Different classrooms were in different buildings. So it was very trying at the beginning to adjust to those type of differences.
What's your favorite subject in school?
My favorite subject was not math. It was anything I could read.
Okay.
I love books, and I love reading. I used to bring my book home that you could read poetry and stories. So I guess it might have been English, maybe science.
Oh, okay.
Because I was always curious about, things. But I guess if I narrowed it down to one, it would be probably English.
Cool. Cool. Okay, what stands out the most to you about your school experience?
Um, I think that was the thing that stood out to me most were the differences in the schools. I think that was what, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
The difference in the schools, I think that was what stood out most to me. And the children that I met, they made sure I met children before I went into school the first time there. They would take me to different places where other little girls lived. And one of them lived on the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And I had never been on a mountain. So driving down a mountain on straight and then going upward and upward like you're going up a hill, that was very frightening for me. I thought the car was going to flip over any moment. But I think those were things that I'll never forget. The friends, the school, Virginia Tech, and the lady that I lived with. Anybody would think anyone was that old wouldn't be able to take care of you, but she took care of me. She made sure I ate my meals and clean clothes. And she would get on her piano and sing for me and rock back and forth. And so those were things that I remember most. One of the schools I went to was like a school where you could, I guess you would call it vocational school now, but it was upstairs and you could take cosmetology. So I took a cosmetology class. You could take music, so I learned how to play an Indian song on the piano. And those were things that I would not have had the opportunity to do um, if I hadn't gone there.
Okay. All right. Okay. So when the schools reopened in Prince Edward, what did you do?
When schools reopened in Prince Edward, what happened was the daughter came home from work that weekend, and she told us or told me that schools were going to be closed next year. I was so happy. I just couldn't wait to go back home to my family because my mother was not able to visit me, and but once and twice really when I graduated from the first school, what would be a middle school. I graduated from there, and I was named salutatorian of that class after being out of school for 2 years, and I do credit my teachers for that. Um, so I forgot your question.
Oh, so when Prince Edward reopened their schools, what did
Okay,
you do? Yeah.
I came back home.
Mm.
The Ms. Anderson, the lady I lived with, offered me an opportunity to go to school, finish school there. And if I would finish school there, she would send me to college.
Mm.
But I was too young to know the significance of a college education. I didn't know anyone else who had gone to college in my community, not thinking that teachers might have too young to even realize that teachers had to have gone to college to teach. So me not knowing the significance of it and wanting to go back home to my family and friends, I came back home. When I came back home, it was confusing, very confusing. Um, Leaving from a school that was stable and coming back home to a school that was trying to put the pieces together. Having classrooms where kids were 16 years old and 20 years old in one class together. One 6 years old, and they were all mixed up. They had to figure things out that first year. So that was really confusing, and a lot of kids, older kids, dropped out of school because of that. They just couldn't take it. They couldn't take the fact of them being in school, out of school for 5 whole years, being in the classroom with kids who had gone away and gone to school, and they were so, it was different. It was a difference. Excuse me. So I came back. I was glad I came back home, even with that confusion, because I love my town, Farmville. I'll tell everybody that. Excuse me. Excuse me a minute.
Sam.
I fixed this just in case I started this.
Smart.
So, I was glad to be back home, and I started in high school when I came back, because that was the year that I would have gone, if I stayed up there. And I finished high school and graduated, and was very happy to be back here.
Okay. So, okay. Let's see. Well, I mean, I know this. I know you continued your education. Would you share that experience through the Brown Scholarship?
Well, I continued my education before the Brown Scholarship.
Sure.
Actually, I was going to night classes at Southside Community College. And then I took a class, at least one class at Longwood. So that was when I was younger. But when I became when I was 59 years old, I was enrolled in college for the first time in my entire life. And it was under the Brown Scholarship. The Brown Scholarship was a scholarship that was given to anyone who were directly affected by the closing of the schools.
Okay.
So, of course, I love school, always have. So I made sure I put in my application for it at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to college at St. Paul's, graduated with a bachelor's degree. And I thought to myself, my mother had already passed, and I looked up and I said, well, Mom, I have fulfilled your dream. You let your only little girl go away and live with strangers. And let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
One thing I really want to talk about is when she took me to live with the strangers,
Mm-hmm.
when she left, they were only in there for a while, talking, and she left and she walked away and she didn't say anything. She didn't turn around and say anything to me. She didn't give me a hug. She didn't do anything. And I was screaming.
Mm.
I was screaming, Mama, Mama, don't leave me. Mama, Mama, please, please don't leave me. And she never turned around. She just walked away and got in the car, never looked back. Do you know why she never turned around?
Mm.
Because I was screaming inside. She couldn't hear me.
Mm.
Because I knew if I had screamed out loud, she probably would have come back and gotten me, and I would have had to go back to Prince Edward County to no school.
Mm.
So I getting back to my education, the Brown Scholarship was a miracle in my life. It gave me an opportunity to get my education and get 2 degrees, bachelor's and master's. My bachelor's from St. Paul College and my master's from Liberty University. And they also gave me the opportunity to continue my education for my doctorate degree, tuition for my doctorate degree, but I decided that I wanted to do something else. I decided I wanted to write.
Okay.
So I've written 2 books and have 2 more getting ready for published. And all of them are about schools closing. And after that, then I'll start writing about some fun stuff.
Yeah, you kind of have to lay the groundwork and explain what happened, especially for me, it's always important to have the first person perspective,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who lived the experience, because they know what happened.
Yeah.
To share it. Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. So what would you want students today to know about your experience?
I want students to know that to never give up, to learn everything that you can while you're in school. And I want them to know that they can do anything, and don't let anyone make them feel or think that they cannot do anything. I want them to make sure that they stay in school. And please, please don't drop out until at least you get your high school education.
Mhm.
It's best when you do that, continue. It's best when you do that when you're young, of course, because like at my age, you don't think it's quick, and young people can think really, really quick. And but I want them to know that even if they don't do it when they're young, it's never too late
Yeah.
to get your education. And I'm an example of it.
Okay. Um, Let me think. Is there anything you want to share with us that we haven't covered yet?
Um, I wanted to also say to the students that learn as much as they can while they're in school and get as much education in something,
Mhm.
whether it's college, trade school, or whatever, because I think students will be very surprised at how much money they can earn at some careers they never even thought of. So I want them to go to the guidance counselor, search the career, and choose one early and work on it so that they will be able to have a good life. Um, and most of all, I want them to never give up, be consistent,
Mm.
um, get their education, be respectful to others, and please, please graduate, 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 graduate.
Yeah. All right. Well, very powerful words. Really important to use those resources and those guidance counselors to guide you when you're trying to figure out what comes next. Um, I can't think of anything offhand about your particular experience. We haven't really covered um, about being in school. Oh, could you share like what it was like in the classrooms in Blacksburg? How that teaching experience, like what was your, walk me through a day in Blacksburg and school there.
Well, backing up a little bit, the day that I arrived in Blacksburg, Virginia, Ms. Anderson had someone to drive me to school so I could see my school. And the next day, I had to walk in this new town. And I was walking and walking and walking and wondering whether I was going in the right direction. And all of a sudden, I saw my school, but the school was down there and I was up here. And I was so terrified. I was afraid to cry because I knew if I went to school crying the first day, kids would tease me forever.
Mm.
I walked around in a circle until I got to the school. And when I walked in, the class was, teacher had the class waiting for me.
Oh,
Yes,
that means a lot.
it does. And I looked around. I was just shaking, really. I looked around and I could see some of the friends, the kids that they had taken me to the house the day
Mhm.
before. So that made me very comfortable. Um, I don't know whether it was a different teaching style. Like every teacher has their different teaching style. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember I loved it. I was a bookworm always, and I became a bookworm in Blacksburg, Virginia.
Mhm.
Um, and I enjoyed going to school every single day, every single day. Uh,
What was your favorite book growing up and now?
hmm. I like books that has, my favorite book at one time was poetry.
Mm.
And I was really leaning toward Black poets,
Mm.
except for Frost. I liked him. And so poetry was my main, that's what I read mostly. Then I moved into just any story. I love short stories.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
brought home a literature book uh, that had short stories in the back of it. excuse me, and I always read those. And then as I got older, I became a romantic. So I started reading romantic books,
Okay.
books that touched your heart and ended a happy had a happy ending.
Yeah, yeah, definitely
And then
understand.
I also read books on tape. I had a box of books on tape that I would just when I was doing my walking,
Yeah,
I would listen to those. So books has always been a big part of my life, and it still is.
yeah, that's awesome. I do love an audiobook. When you're in the car driving, just put it on. It's great. It's awesome. Definitely, if students, if you don't really like to read, that's a great option. You still
Mhm.
get in the story without the stress of having the book in front of you.
But I'm a person who loves books. I love the touch of it. I
Yeah.
know you can get ebooks and things like that, which I may just decide to do ebooks for the books that I published
Mhm.
because of the fact that students really lean toward them most. But I myself like the feel of a book in my hand and being able to turn the pages and putting a bookmark where I stopped and then continuing. It's just something about that. Um, I have a couple of ebooks on my computer, but my favorite is the actual hard.
Okay. To hold the text. Yeah, definitely understand that. I have my house is basically a library and always have my e-reader somewhere close. So I
That's it.
dabble in both worlds.
I actually have 4 bookcases in my house
Yeah.
of books. That's
Hmm.
how much I love them.
Yeah. Um, okay. So we covered the schools being closed, how it impacted. Oh, yeah. In your opinion, how do you feel that Prince Edward was changed when the schools closed? Just how the community changed.
I think the community has changed tremendously. Um, I never actually had an incident as far as prejudice against me personally, but once in my life, and this town has tried to do better. They've tried to open things up to everyone, and it's growing so fast. Uh, so um, I think the people have changed too. Most of them, the majority of them have changed the outlook differently than they had.
Okay. All right. Was there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I can't. When we stop, I'm gonna think of everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's just that I am so glad that I was able to have the opportunity um, to continue my education, and I thank Brown versus Board Scholarship forever. Um, I'll always be thankful for my teachers because teachers is a very important part of young people's lives. They spend most of the time with teachers. And so that's why, well, one of the reasons I said that I want students to be respectful, not only to people around them, but their teachers especially, and not be able to do things that would disrupt them from learning, but other kids in the classroom. I worked as a substitute teacher and teacher's aide for years, and I loved it because I love young people and I love being around them. And kids are really good. They're really good kids. I've always loved them all, no matter what, where they came from, the background, who they were, where they lived. And I've always tried to impress on some kids to let them know that it doesn't matter who your parents are. It doesn't matter what your parents did. It doesn't matter, most of all, the environment or street that you live on. That doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do for yourself and educate yourself, and you can get out of any environment that you want to if you follow those guidelines.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, that's all I have for right now. Um, Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We really greatly appreciate it here at the Moton Museum. Um, yeah.
Thank you for giving me. Thank you for giving me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely, anytime.